This is the meeting of the Oregon City Transportation Advisory Committee for October 24th, 1923. It is the monthly meeting in October, but it has been delayed a week due to staff unavailability last week. So with all that, can we have the roll call, please?
Yes. Mr. Rendelman.
Here.
Mr. Freeze.
Here.
Ms. Wadsworth.
Here.
Ms. Donovan.
Here.
Mr. McEnroth.
Here.
Mr. Morgan.
Here.
Mr. Jessic.
Here. And next, approval of the minutes. Does anybody have anything they would like to change or alter or make clearer or any of that in the minutes? If not, I would have a motion, if it's available, for adoption in a second.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded, I believe, to accept the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Moving on. Is there anything that anybody wants to add to the agenda for tonight or future? Not hearing anything. We are moving on to public comments. And we have two citizens who would like to speak. And I will let the two of you decide who wants to go first, because I assume you're going to talk about the same thing.
No.
Oh, okay.
Probably not. Can I press the red button?
Yes, please.
We need your name and your address, please.
Is a short. It's off. Is it on?
It's on.
Okay. Do you want me to say it again? Paulette Merrill, 16390 Hiram Avenue, that's in Park Place. Hiram Avenue is a short north-south street that starts on Holcomb and dead ends in Park Place Park. We're to the west, we have Front Street, and it is a real street. Hiram is like a one lane, maybe, street. And we have some streets, if Hiram and Front are the H, the cross streets are Rock, Gain, and Clear. And over the years, we have all this infill housing that has happened, and Rock, Gain, and Clear are much more populated than they used to be. Rock extends past Hiram, as does Clear. And those streets are even narrower than Hiram. And I personally have almost been hit twice from traffic coming down the extension of Rock. There used to be 3 houses there, and then we just got 3 more on the opposite side that are like this far apart. And they come down, there's no stop signs. There's 2 trees in the front yard of the house on the corner of Hiram and Rock. And so I don't know if it's a combination of the people can't see or if the people are just, well, I know they're going too fast because, anyway. So my concern is that I think we need at least stop signs and probably some attention to the trees, I hate to say, although I do like the trees. They're just starting to take off nicely. But, you know, they're required to have trees in their front yard, and then they grow. And that takes away the sight distance from the cars. And so my concern basically is safety for the people going down Hiram and the traffic coming off of these Rock, Gain, and Clear onto Hiram and also onto Front. That's my spiel.
If the traffic at these intersections that doesn't seem to be able to see cross traffic, is that, and
Well, on
pedestrians?
that one corner, I think part of the issue is sight. But another part of the issue is they're just going, they come out of the driveway and I don't know what they think they're gonna do when they get to Hiram, except, take off on Hiram. And we're not a real populated street, except when there's traffic on it. And then, it's just like any other street. Those people need to stop before they turn.
And this seems to be something that would best have staff look into and report back to the,
I'd be more than happy to share my card with
Okay.
with Paula, and something like this. Again, I'll check it out. I'll have a traffic manager check it out and see what improvements may or may not be able to be done out there, and be happy to report back.
Okay, thank you. I was told by neighborhood association this was a place to
and
come.
thank you for bringing it to the attention.
And they
Thank you.
were right. Thank you.
Just a weird cut. Picture in my head when she's
Hello,
talking about it.
my name is Paul Edgar. live in the Kanema area, 211 Fifth Avenue. I first wanted to thank the city and everybody for advancing this street, the improvement project, or getting a grant on McLaughlin up to 10th. I saw it on the when I was going through the agenda for tonight that you guys were going to be, was going to be talked out. And I just, years ago, I was on the Urban Renewal Commission for Oregon City when we were putting together the initial funding for the Riverwalk and for all of the development that was going on prior to Grand Ron buying the property there. And I've had 3 decades in transportation work and as an analyst and trying to solve problems in transportation for a long time. And immediately I started thinking, oh my God, here we have this intersection of Main Street and McLaughlin Boulevard. And I went down there and started doing timings of crosswalk. How much time did it take out of through traffic? And I said, if we have 1,000 or 2,000 visitors trying to get into what do we call it? What's the Grand Ron call it? Tumwata, that village. And they hit that crosswalk. Pretty soon, people going north and south on McLaughlin Highway 99E won't be able to go anyplace because it will jam it up more and more and more. And I says, this is a kind of a critical choke point where we could really change the lives and the profitability of businesses. That was, quite a few years ago. So over the last 10 years, the incidents of travel on Highway 99 have doubled. Okay, now we have the big investments in Canby, Columbia Distributing. Those trucks coming back and forth, how many of them are using Highway 99? And now we throw the new added option or opportunity for us all is tolling and getting 40,000 cars going across the old bridge a day. And how would they filter out? Where would they go? Back and forth. I just see this study that you guys are getting funding for, absolutely critical. Because all of a sudden, it will allow us to quantify so many different things. Because in my opinion, ODOT's been lying to us about diversion. They don't even consider it a problem. I've been to all these meetings. And all of a sudden, you start pricing prices up like what they're talking about. People will drive 12 miles out of the way just to avoid paying a toll. So what do you think they're going to do if they are faced with $1,000 a year in additional tolling costs to go home, go to work, take their kids to school, whatever it is? They're going to divert. And this diversion factor is going to be the biggest impediment to this city that there's ever existed for survival. And I don't know, I think we got to have our act together. We have to have every figure thought, everybody working together as a team. And this study gives us part of this opportunity to fund and start to really get down to the detail of what's happening. Because we have people at ODOT, they're being paid to make tolling happen, period. That's their job. Reason is not part of what they're trying to do. So if we want to save Clackamas County, Oregon City, all of the cities, West Lynn, or Gladstone, we got to start thinking smart right up front as soon as we can. And this is just one effort. And again, thank you all for doing it. Because if we're not doing it, we're going to tie our hands behind our back. We've got to have facts to be able to present that will help us defend our position. Thank you.
Thank you. Does staff have anything to add to this, or do they want to put it off until we discuss it later?
Yeah, I think it'd be best if we just talk specifically to the study and what it
Okay.
entails. Yeah. But appreciate the comments.
Yeah. All righty, we will do that. Next is some new business, which is, first item is that staff wants to know about meeting to discuss reappointment of two of its members to this committee. So whoever wants to talk about that, do so.
Yeah, so Ben Simmons and Tim Morgan, their term ends on December 31st. And in order to get it approved by the mayor before the next year, we need to have that, have the interviews at the next meeting. So usually we meet at 5:45 prior to the 6 o'clock time to do those interviews. And then we'll invite the mayor, she could come. And that way we'll have it for the December city commission meeting for her to do the appointments at that time.
Is there anybody
no
have
gap.
anything,
That's
any
right.
discussion? Is the suggested time good for
You have
everybody?
a wrap that we refill, okay.
Not hearing anybody say anything, it looks like carry on.
I'll send a meeting invite for everybody.
This second item was discussion of the neighborhood associations and schedules of meetings. Is there anything you want to say about that? I know there was an attachment to the agenda that went out, but
Yes, so for the neighborhood association meetings, I'm getting over there. I just wanted to provide the list of the scheduled visits that everybody has volunteered for. And note that there were a few that were inactive. Chris has volunteered to look into the Kanema, is that Kanema, thank you. And now I'm gonna get it wrong, the Eliville, is that how you pronounce it?
Elyville.
Eliville, thank you, Eliville. And then Bruce was gonna follow up with the Gaffney Lane. I'm not sure if we've heard anything on that date yet.
Oh, I've been trying to figure out when it is, but I got a little tied up with work, so
Yeah.
I will get in there.
That sounds good. And then I wanted to point out that to reach out to the neighborhood associations, I can send a link to everybody, but also by going to the Oregon City website, you could type in the search neighborhood associations over here, and it would also bring you to this website. Just, it's a quick way of getting here. And then you would find the neighborhood off to the left here, and the contact information is usually here, but right now for Gaffney Lane, it's vacant, so there's nobody to contact.
That's probably why. I was like, normally I get a card. I normally get a card in the mail, so I was like, any day now.
Yeah, so if we would go to Kanema, we could see that we could contact Clint and email them. Generally, they're just emails that are contacts for them. That's how you'd go about it.
Not hearing anybody have any questions or anything, we'll move on.
And I guess all that is just in the ongoing effort to kind of stay connected between the TAC and the neighborhoods. So there's no, I mean, I think that to the degree we can get out, and Vance and I can cover some of those too if need be, but a lot of the neighborhoods aren't that active, so.
As long as, if I'm in town, I don't mind going to whoever's. I used to go to them all, so
That's
it's kind
right.
of fun to see everybody again.
There you go. Oh, okay.
But if I'm in town, I don't mind. So if you find something, you can always.
Yeah, I think like what we learned with the McLaughlin neighborhood was that they do want to be reached out to and have a connection to us. And so my understanding was that at the beginning of the year, they had set it as a goal for all of you to meet with one of the like each of the different neighborhood associations to create that relationship. So.
How many do we have, we haven't seen so far? Did you see back on your list? or-
Yeah.
So we got, what, 3
Some of them
left?
aren't active. Yeah. I don't think Tower Vista's active either, and neither is Twin Rivers, yeah. I think those are inactive too.
Yeah, Gaffney Lane looks questionable, so I'll see if I can find out some more information. I've been Googling it, but that's probably why I keep coming back to nothing.
And yeah, and if you go to the neighborhood association website.
Yeah, that's where
all
it showed
the-
it all
like,
vacant
they're all
there.
right there, so it'll make it a little bit quicker to reach out to them.
On, you know,
Next,
and then take over.
On the agenda will be Public Works report, and whomever is going to do that.
Well, for the most part of the Public Works report, I've been out, so Dana's, and most of these topics were topics that Dana took on. Now, she's online. I'm not sure if it's gonna work out just perfectly, so we'll see if that works first. And if it does, she'll probably take it away and just work through every one of these items, because she's got, and to the degree we can chime in, we're happy to do that too.
Dana, are you available?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Can you see it okay?
Was that a yes? Yeah, okay, sorry, I didn't hear anyone respond back, sorry. Apologies for being on Zoom. Got a little bit of a cold and working to keep my germs to myself. So I'll start tonight with the Washington Street and 9th Street crosswalk review. So last month we had neighbors attend our meeting and share concerns about the Washington and 9th Street crosswalk. So here you can see kind of a windshield view on the left side of the screen, both kind of facing north and south, and then an aerial view of that crosswalk that we'll be discussing tonight. Included in your packet and on the next slide is kind of my technical review. And I can kind of quickly walk you through that. So from an existing condition perspective, Washington Street is a minor arterial and it functions as an uncontrolled two-lane roadway. And so when we refer to a roadway as uncontrolled, that means there are no stop signs on that street. And there is parking on both sides of the street in this area. The speed limit on Washington is 25 miles an hour. And based on our most recent traffic counts, has an average daily traffic volume of about 10,000 vehicles. 9th Street is classified as a local street with a two-lane roadway, parking on both sides. 9th Street is stop controlled where it intersects with Washington Street. So currently the intersection has that marked crosswalk that we saw on that last slide. On the southwest leg of the intersection. It is considered a high visibility longitudinal bar or ladder style crosswalk and includes our standard signage with the yellow signage with the pedestrian and the arrow. The crosswalk also has advanced signage, which includes the ahead marking. And so those signs are shown there on the top. And then the longitudinal bar crosswalk is Oregon City's standard high visibility crosswalk marking that we use at all of our crosswalks. So it has current and adequate signage and striping for the intersection. The next slide shows, so we did do a quick look at street lighting, and the yellow triangle is the existing PGE Cobra head style street light at the intersection. And then the blue circles are the pedestrian ahead signs, so in advance of the crosswalk. And then right at the crosswalk is the crosswalk with the arrow signage. Our transportation crew did stick our covert speed box out. And it looks like the average speed out there was 25.46 miles per hour with a 50th percentile of 26 and an 80th percentile of 29. So about what you would expect at a 25 mile an hour roadway. I did also look in our transportation system plan. This intersection was not identified for a future crossing enhancement project. We have approximately, I believe, 40 intersections that we identified for future crossing enhancements, and this was not one of them. The next slide gives a quick review of crash history. I looked at crashes along this corridor from the years 2017 to 2021. At the time, those were the most current full years of data available through ODOT's crash system. And I found 3 crashes. In 2017, a possible injury, which occurred during a turning movement. The conditions were clear, dark, and dusk. The driver failed to yield, and there was no bicycle or pedestrian involved. In 2019, a possible injury from a rear end. Those conditions were clear, dry, and dusk as well, and the driver failed to avoid a parked vehicle. No bike or pedestrian was involved in the incident. And in 2021, a property damage only, which was a fixed object crash, clear, dry, and daylight. The driver was cited for improper driving. So that could have been a street sign or a tree, a power pole type of a thing. And again, no bike or pedestrian was involved. So with a corridor, you know, I really only looked from 8th to 10th. So just 2 blocks, there were just those 3 crashes. Again, no bike or pedestrian and no fatalities. And the corridor doesn't experience a higher than average number of crashes for a corridor of this type. Excuse me. So kind of once I did that existing conditions review, I used the Federal Highway Administration's Guide for Improving Safety at Uncontrolled Crossing Locations. the city does not have our own adopted policy, and so I've used that guidebook for this review. And I think on the slide, it's going to kind of give you the technical review, but the table I'm referring to will be on the next slide. So maybe we'll go to that. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. And so in this document, you identify your volume of cars and your speed, and then you look at your lane. So in that red box there, you'll see the criteria that I would look at for a 2-lane roadway with greater than 9,000 but less than 15,000 and a less than 30 miles per hour. And so what I found based on that document was the items that should always be considered but are not mandated or required, and it's based on engineering judgment, is that high visibility crosswalk markings, which I found do exist, parking restrictions on the crosswalk approach, which does not currently exist, adequate nighttime lighting levels. We could look at our lighting levels in this area with PGE to confirm if they meet that. 2 of our crashes at this area did occur at dusk, and the third one is at daylight. So there isn't a lot of nighttime crashes, but we could still look at lighting levels. And then the crosswalk warning signs, and those do exist. And so of those 4 that we should consider, we could look at parking restrictions and we could review lighting levels. And then other options that could be identified from that matrix would be in-street pedestrian crossing signage. And those signs, I didn't put a visual of those, but those signs are a tough item from a maintenance perspective. They're regularly hit because they are placed in the pavement. And so typically we don't like to place those out there unless we've got a way to kind of keep them from being hit. And the other item that the crossing would suggest we look at as a possible countermeasure is a curb extension. And at this point, I think recommendation would be that if we have a long-term project, that we look at that. So again, at the bottom of this slide here, those short-term options that we don't have would be the parking restrictions and a review of the street lighting. And then the long-term would be looking at curb extensions if a Washington Street corridor project is able to be funded. And so that next slide just gives a visual kind of the concept of a curb extension. So you would bump the curb and the crossing out to kind of protect the parking lane and give the pedestrians a shorter distance to cross and get them out from behind those parked vehicles. So I know, I think the neighborhood had a little bit of concern about parking restrictions, and so I think that's where maybe the staff is looking for a little guidance.
Yeah, I can take it here for a second, Dana, if you don't mind. Audrey, if you could go back to the first slide that had the 3 pictures, please. So the picture on the right, I've indicated where we could have 2 no parking areas. I've driven the site every direction, I've walked it. I think there will be some benefit in making a portion of each of those curbed areas no parking zone. I spoke with Jason Thornburg, our transportation manager, and in this case, because it would be a new traffic control device, we would use signage, right? No parking signs with arrows pointing at each other, and we would paint the curbs yellow. That way there's no doubt that it is no parking. I know from previous experience that's easily enforceable by the PD. So if somebody parks there, they can certainly get a ticket. I have not decided on how many feet from the crosswalk. That's a conversation I'll have with Dana and John and my transportation manager. But generally speaking, 30 feet is usually a good number. we've done that before. I think that's similar to what we did on Berta and Gaffney. And that gives you basically a car and a half, maybe two small cars that would not be parked in that area to get that better sight distance for motorists to be able to see the ped on the ADA ramps waiting to cross. So that's something very easy for us to do. And actually, I haven't told John this, but Jason and I intend on go ahead and making it happen. We will do some outreach to the church and to the homeowner on that corner. Usually we can have good conversations with those entities and get them to agree that for safety, it's a good measure to have happen. So more to follow on that, but that's something that I personally I think should happen anyway. And we can do that quite easily with city forces.
I drove that on a Sunday during church, and I came down 9th there, and cars were parked on both sides all the way to that crosswalk. And if you're making a left, you can't see around those cars. I mean, you have to really
Right.
scooch out to see. So I think that would be a great step in the right direction. And maybe the least expensive route to at least attempt.
I have a request, is that I'd like to see the grades on Washington between 8th Street and 10th Street, because I know that 8th Street and Washington is about 2 feet lower than the 9th Street intersection. And I know you have a steep grade coming up from 10th Street. So my concern is that drivers cannot see oncoming traffic in time to make a left turn onto 9th Street. And that endangers the pedestrians who have to figure out what all the drivers are doing. And 9th Street is a bus route. They come up Washington and turn on 9th. And I think John Adams is probably the drop-off in that direction. So any passengers going to High Street are going to go down there. And also,
Henry, can you repeat kind of where you think the grades need to be looked at?
pardon?
Can you repeat where you think the grades need to be looked at? On Washington Street? On Washington Street, either side? Where else?
Because what I'm thinking is that you got a left turn, you got a conflict of traffic, you got a conflict of pedestrians. You have testimony that pedestrians can't see oncoming traffic coming up from 7th Street. I know from a fact that people trying to cross Washington from High Street have equal problems because you can't see traffic coming up the hill due to parked cars or whatever, and the drivers can't see the pedestrians to give way like they're supposed to. So I think there's greater problems at that intersection than what we've found so far.
Well, we'd be happy to get the grades for you on Washington, but regardless of the percentage of grade, it's the relationship of where that grade transitions, right?
Right.
And how many feet away that transition is from the intersection.
Yeah, I think the ridge line is on the,
North.
edge of the church by the 8th Street side of the church. But at 25 miles an hour, that still doesn't give you a lot of time to react in this traffic level.
And what I'm hearing is, I mean, you understand grades, but what the group might be interested in is this, a little more sight distance analysis, right? For all the directions. Because what I heard you say was, if you're on 9th Street coming from High, it's hard to make any turns, right? Or any through movements. And there may be an
Wait,
issue with.
Ninth to High?
No, if you're,
That doesn't
if you're
make
on
sense.
9th and you're coming from High Street, right? Or Center Street.
Oh, okay,
Sorry.
center, all right, I'm like, High Street? No.
Yeah, Center Street. So
Okay.
if you're coming from the Center Street side, which in this drawing would be, or in this picture, the one on the left would be kind of that upper leg, on the left-hand side there. So any movement out of there, so what I'm hearing is there's a concern about sight distance, right? Because this is what you're asking about is, I mean, you might want to see grades, but what we really need to see is a sight distance review of all the legs.
I know I've come up that, from Washington, from 10th Street, watching the traffic, watching whatever. And just as I cross get into the intersection, I notice there's somebody on the High Street side of Washington who wants to cross, and I haven't seen him. So I'm just saying there's more going on there, I think, than what we've found so far. But I think that's probably enough on that subject.
Well, willing to hear more. I don't know if anybody else has been to the site or.
Unless somebody wants to.
I live in the neighborhood, and I was wondering if it would just open up a can of worms, or if it's even possible. How do you make any left-hand turns? Right-hand turns only. Would that increase safety? It's another maybe cheaper solution than the curb extensions, but until we get the curb extensions, we're looking for other solutions.
Yeah, so, I think he's saying from Washington or from 9th.
Yeah, I
So
think
any
no
direction.
left turns, whether you're going along 9th or along Washington. We'll look at closing down all the left turns.
I mean, so let's keep in mind, this is in the heart of our historic neighborhood, so.
Right.
Changes here, retrofits are challenging. That said, we tried prohibiting left turns at 12th and Washington, which had a turn lane there, and it was a catastrophe, and there was, I wouldn't even want to try, we used barrels to try it, and it still ended up in an accident, so at least one accident. So the problem is, how do you prevent it, right? Because you still want the through movements to happen. You can put signage there, but that kind of signage is not going to work, and then you're going to have, if you have an accident, then, you know, you take on that liability of essentially missigning the intersection. So I hear what you're saying. You're right. If we could prohibit left turns around the city, we'd have a lot less accidents, but
People wouldn't know how to get home.
it's just not practical in most locations, and this is probably one of those where I think that would be impractical. I think we can do something with a little more analysis on the sight distance, and that might help further justify how far back we paint the no parking. I also think I agree with Henry on the cars coming on 9th, pulling up to the intersection. I think it's kind of you live on 9th, right? Oh, you live, okay, well, those people that live on 9th that want to come up to Washington and make a left, right, or through turn, it's hard to see. And so is there a need for no parking on that other corner as well? So we could definitely look at that, Henry. Okay,
Next to be the TriMet survey.
All right, so this is just a reminder, I believe, an email went out to the entire TAC as well as various other city committees, encouraging folks to review the proposal and provide any comments or suggestions back to TriMet about the proposed changes.
And it's easy to do.
Is
I
there
did
any
it.
questions?
And I recommend you all, especially if you're a bus user, or plan to be, to go and look at that because some of the changes are significant. Willamette Falls Shared Use Path Concept Planning.
Yes, so included in the packet was a short staff report, and I'll go ahead and just, and a fact sheet, and then I'll go ahead and just get started on the presentation. And so for tonight, I'm just going to give a high overview of the project and the goals, how we got here, where we're going, and expectations moving forward. The next slide. For a quick overview, the city received Metro Regional Flexible Fund grant for this project, which includes what we refer to as project development funding for our final, most complicated phase of McLaughlin Boulevard. This section from 10th Street to Railroad Avenue or Tumwata Village, the mill site redevelopment includes crumbling, narrow sidewalks, dilapidated railings that do not meet current safety standards, limited street lighting, and the project is interwoven with the 99E viaducts. So from 8th to 9th is a partial viaduct. So, from 10th to 9th is a partial viaduct. So at 10th, it's a full, on full solid ground. And by the time you get to 9th, it's a viaduct. And then from 8th to 9th is a full viaduct. So if you've been out on the river, you may have noticed there's a bridge structure there, and you can actually walk behind the courthouse, down a set of stairs under 99E, and get down to the river there. So the goals of this work is to close the gap and provide a safe pedestrian and bicycle access along the Willamette River, and provide a complete street design for McLaughlin Boulevard from 10th Street to Railroad Avenue. When we use the term complete street, we're talking about a process and an approach to a street design that looks at planning, designing, and building streets that enable safe access for all users. That includes pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and transit riders of all ages and abilities. This type of project would typically include above-ground improvements such as sidewalks, curbs, ADA ramps, streetlights, street trees, paving, benches, trash receptacles. A good example of a complete street is the recently completed Malala Avenue streetscape project, or another example would be Main Street from 5th to 10th that was completed a handful of years ago. Next slide. So this slide kind of gives a visual of the project area. So again, we're really focused on McLaughlin Boulevard, looking both at the river side as well as the non-river side. So right now there is some sidewalk on the non-river side and some on the river side as well. When you're walking on a 5-foot sidewalk next to a 4-lane highway, it doesn't feel very comfortable or safe. And so we're including all of those types of reviews. Again, we include Main Street in this project area outline with sort of an understanding that if we can't come to an agreement on what our preferred alignment and path type is, that's kind of that no build or backup plan would be to route bicyclists and pedestrians down Main Street. Next slide. So this slide gets a little bit busy, but kind of shows, first I'll start with kind of the aerial photos. The project extents, we originally kind of had it just along McLaughlin Boulevard or Highway 99E. As you saw on the last slide, we extended that to include Main Street as well, knowing that if we can't come to that option along 99E, we would route pedestrians down Main Street. The blue area is an overlay of our mixed-use multimodal area, which includes the majority of the downtown. And then for the call-out photos, I'll start in the top right with a view of phase one, which has those safe sidewalks, landscape medians, and a center turn lane. Top center is a view of the viaducts from the Willamette River, if you haven't seen those. So you can go underneath there and you can see the top of the courthouse. Top left is looking north. That's the current cross-section, which lacks safe sidewalks and center turn lanes in this area. On the left, lower left is looking south. It's a cross-section lacking safe sidewalks, and there are no turn lanes there, although there are many vehicles that do make a left in that southbound direction through this corridor. And then the bottom right is looking south with, again, no safe sidewalks. So you'll see those photos of the current area, what we often refer to as phase three, is very much a kind of a sea of asphalt and concrete. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we received the Regional Flexible Funds grant from Metro. We were awarded $673,000 in 2020 for project development. That work will include alternatives analysis and evaluation. So how will we provide a shared use path along the viaducts and the partial viaduct, knowing we're adjacent to a river and we're in a constrained corridor? How will the path incorporate and or make its way around the historic arch bridge? You know, there are, it's on the National Register, and so we need to make sure we're thinking about how does this pathway interact with that bridge? And will the path stay at street level, or might it drop down towards the river? And in that topic, we'll get an understanding of users. Would they feel safe if they were not visible from the roadway, from the passing vehicles, because from a safety perspective, or might they feel safer because they're further away from the vehicles? And so kind of getting an understanding of how the community would feel about that. This final phase is really an opportunity for Oregon City's community vision to eliminate years of neglect towards the river, better integrate McLaughlin Boulevard into the downtown area, and reestablish a safe and appealing community and tourism connection. So between myself and Christina Robertson Gardner and our planning group, we've been kind of taking this presentation around to multiple advisory committees and groups, and really trying to get the word out that this work is kicking off now. We have found from ODOT that they do not anticipate replacing those viaducts anytime in the future. So, you know, we know that going in, and we can make decisions based on that. So the work we've done to date to get to this point, in 2005, the city adopted the McLaughlin Boulevard Enhancement Plan. Not long after that, they moved forward into phase one construction, which built the improvements from I-205 to 10th Street. Again, they moved pretty quickly in the construction world into the phase two in 2012, which funded the improvements from Dunes Drive to the Clackamas River Bridge. And then in 2014, the city worked with ODOT to get a special transportation area designation, and that is done by the Oregon Transportation Commission, and it identifies a corridor where the convenience of movement is focused upon pedestrians, bicycle traffic, and transit modes. And so the objective of that is to provide access to and circulation among community activities, businesses, and residents to accommodate those non-vehicle movements along and across a highway. Also in 2014, we adopted that mixed-use multimodal area that I showed on the previous mapping, and that identifies a different set of values that we place on multimodal travel and essentially identifying compact mixed-use development as a goal for that area. Next slide. So on this slide, I grabbed aerial photos to So this first one is our phase one area, and you can see there in the red circle, we had a large kind of sea of pavement and asphalt. And in the after condition in 2022 aerial photo, you can see we've got those nice white lines of new sidewalk. We've got street trees in the median, and really being able to create safer, more user-friendly areas for bicycles and pedestrians. So by eliminating that kind of sweeping on-ramp movement, we really were able to channelize and give pedestrians a safe way to cross that traffic entering the highway. In the blue area, you can see we have a new traffic signal and crosswalk, adding the ability for pedestrians to cross McLaughlin Boulevard, which was not an option in this location prior to the project. And again, we've got the raised center median with the trees. So really, even from an aerial view, it's much more inviting to bicycles and pedestrians through this phase one. Next slide. So these are some windshield views of that area. At the top is in 2007, prior to the project. We actually even had a Jersey barrier that ran along there that really did limit bicycles or pedestrians from crossing 99E. And you can see with the after condition, we've now got the traffic signal, they've got push buttons, they've got a center refuge, and a nice wide sidewalk. Next slide. So in phase two project, the improvements were down near Dunes Drive. So the Clackamas River Bridge is to the north. And again, in the red circle, you can see the vehicle and pedestrian safety improvements along McLaughlin Boulevard and at what's often referred to as Firestone Alley or Firestone Way. So they've really identified where a pedestrian is expected to be encountering a vehicle and kind of tightening up those areas for pedestrians. We've got a raised center median with landscaping, limiting left turns onto that Firestone Way from 99E. And again, the street trees in the tree wells, as well as trees in the median area. In the blue circle was improvements at the Dunes Drive signalized intersection. The project reopened that south leg crosswalk. It had been closed prior to the project, and then right-sizing that left turn queue storage to meet current and future needs. Next slide. So here's an aerial of phase three. As you can see, it's again just asphalt and concrete. There's a little bit of trees along the river down there at the river level, but not a lot of friendly bicycle and pedestrian amenities. Next slide. So usually I hand this off to Christina. Tonight I'm going to try and kind of walk you through from a planning perspective as well. Really, as we look at this, we want to think about this as our city's front door. This is our downtown, this is our living room. So we want to make sure we're thinking about safety. And so we're looking at crash history, bicycle and pedestrian level of traffic stress. How does a pedestrian or a bicycle feel as they're using this corridor? And really taking into account those kind of things. Thinking about it from a tourism perspective. Are there opportunities to encourage more folks to visit our downtown if we had a more exciting waterfront? And then really looking at that Main Street and 99E intersection as well. I know there's been concerns over the years about safety of that. And also looking at it from an economic development and a cultural perspective. And again, this is an ODOT corridor, and so they will maintain this corridor to their standards. But if we want it to be something bigger and better, then that's on the city to kind of share that vision for this corridor and work towards getting us there. Next slide. So the adoption process. We'll work through both technical investigations and tribal outreach using ODOT's tribal liaisons, as well as our technical team has folks on there that can also assist with that work. And then Christina and I are working on general and targeted outreach. We've already reached out to DOCA, reaching out to downtown property owners, setting up some focus groups of bicycle and pedestrian and transit users, thinking about tourism, the general public, and then really trying to ask everyone we've been talking to, who are we missing from this conversation? Who should we be reaching out to? From an adoption perspective, we would adopt this into our transportation system plan. That will allow us to then pursue additional grant funding. So this early work is going to get us a concept and a ballpark cost. We would need to go back and find additional grant funding to really refine that design into a final design. And then once we have it at a final design, really look for that federal funding. And again, it might be in portions. We might identify sections that we can take on in small bites. We're kind of looking at it as a big picture. Next slide. So again, this is kind of just another taking that technical investigation with that community vision and getting us to an adopted conceptual approach. So at this point, we wouldn't be looking for, finalizing specific details, but if we want art along the corridor, which we've heard we do, then we can set aside, a placeholder for art. Would we be picking the art in the next, 6 to 12 months? Probably not, but if we have an idea or some concepts about what art might look like, we can include that in our concept design. Next slide. So this was a slide we shared with the City Commission. And again, the pictures end up a little bit small, but really encouraging, them to think about what do we want our waterfront to be? Access to recreation, historical and cultural preservation, tourism, all ages and abilities, vibrant downtown, economic development, and trying to kind of pull some visual items to kind of encourage them to think big and broad. If we set our aspirations low, we'll likely end up with the alternative of pushing pedestrians and bicycles down Main Street, losing our connection to the Willamette River. Next slide. So our next steps, we'll be heading back to the City Commission at their November and December work sessions, sharing with the City Commission the corridor vision and the purpose and need statement with an intention to get to the alternative concepts that the technical team has been working on. For outreach, again, we're starting to put together a mailing list. We've included all of the Transportation Advisory Committee members in our mailing list. So if you start getting emails about the project and you don't want them, you're welcome to unsubscribe, but we have subscribed you all to that list. We're working through an online open house scheduled for the first part of December, and then also a project website. So the technical team is working hard on those background materials and the preliminary planning, as well as identifying development criteria that we will use to evaluate each of those alternatives. Next slide. So we do have a webpage. So on the city's new webpage, if you search McLaughlin Boulevard enhancements, it'll pop up this phase 3 project. And below this visual, there is a handful of other bits of information and a spot to sign up. So if your neighbor is interested and we didn't automatically sign them up, they could come onto this webpage and sign up for project updates. Are there questions? Next slide.
Dana, I know you're very early in the preliminary design, but just the pinch point getting folks over that ODOT
I
viaduct.
didn't hear that all the way.
Getting folks over that ODOT viaduct, what's the general plan for getting folks over that viaduct pinch point, and being aware that we're in very preliminary design, but what are some concepts that you and the team have put forward so far?
Yeah, so I haven't seen too many of the specifics, but ODOT has been very clear that we are not able to cantilever off of the existing structure. So theoretically, we'd have a separate structure not connected to those viaducts that would run parallel to it. And I think one of those big questions for the community is, since we're a totally separate structure, not cantilevering off, we think with some, we're still kind of looking through the ADA requirements and space, we think we could get down to water's level without too many switchbacks. But we also want to find out from the community if that's something of interest. Would folks use a pathway that takes them down to the water's surface and away from the visual of the passerby vehicles from a safety perspective? You know, it can kind of go both ways. Taking it down to the water's level, it should be a little quieter down lower. You're not going to get as much of the road noise. But then will folks feel safe using it? So I think we've got a decent amount of bridge engineers working on the project. They will be able to provide us options for how to get past the viaduct.
I have a question. Have you contacted the sewer plant? It strikes me that there's a couple of large sewer lines going parallel up at least to the arch bridge that will need to be avoided. And another one,
So,
carry on, I lost my track of thought.
sorry about that. So we haven't yet reached out to West, but yes, West does have a sewer trunk line that runs under 99E. And if you do go under those viaducts, you can see that piping under there. So again, at a point where we would know what we might be putting adjacent to the viaducts, we would definitely reach out to them, you know, to better understand how they access those pipes and how often they need to be able to access them.
I remember my other question. Is the access behind the courthouse to the river still open?
Yes.
I think that's something that should be maintained because I know in the past that people have been in sections along of McLaughlin have been fishing from the river from the sidewalk that's existing at the edge of McLaughlin. So where the road goes out over the viaduct. And so I think there may be some fishing activity in the area that should be considered.
I believe that came up at the city commission meeting as well.
Dana,
And
I
again,
also,
that is a question. Oh, go ahead.
Dana, sorry, I interrupted. Did you reach out to the chamber by any means?
I think they're still on our list. We're kind of slowly making our way. I think we've got the chamber and the business alliance both on our to-do list. I think we started with DOCA just because it's in their, you know, their key area.
If I can help in any way, I'm on board on both of those.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on. Clackamas County Emergency Management Plan for Evacuations. I believe that was yours, Tim.
Yeah, because we were talking about traffic patterns and what kind of car counts. Didn't they have some kind of a meeting? How they were gonna come up with that plan?
I thought so, but I don't hear talking.
Hey, Dana, was this an item you reviewed? I know I saw some
I
links to,
I sent you
some of the regional
few-
work, but,
Yeah, I didn't prepare much for this, John. I sent you a few snippets of information that I've been aware of that Metro's been working on.
well, I missed that, so we'll have to defer this, but, yeah, I think the county and, to some degree, Metro is working on some things, but.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is identify what the actual evacuation route is. You know, we have tsunami route on the coast, or where they're supposed to go. So maybe an emergency setup, we have a established route. And then I guess the next question is, can you control the traffic signaling, you know, in that time? Because I didn't participate in it, but the people who, from my neighborhood, are 2 miles up the road on Holcomb, it took them 2.5 hours to get to Redlands Road during the fire.
Yeah, so I know the neighborhood concern.
Yeah. And so we're just
And
thinking about
so-
how this is all.
That all stemmed from 205 and the fact that 205 was a parking lot. So I think what Dana's talking about is there is some regional review of evacuation routes regionally and how those could be managed. But I'm not caught up with that. I didn't prepare for that. So we'll have to bring this topic back. And
Looks like we've moved on to speed limits and delegated authority and traffic counts.
yeah, so,
Yes. Oh, go ahead, John.
well, I just, are you prepared to talk about this item?
Yes. Sorry, excuse me. So with this screen up on there, I'll start with this slide. So I'll share that historically, the city has done traffic counts every 3 years, and we do the full city. In discussions with our vendor, we're pretty picky about when we want our traffic counts done. We want the community college in session, so that usually means late September, early October. But we also want them done before Thanksgiving. And so that gives the vendor a really small window. And so they reached out to us and said, hey, is there any option to kind of separate the city out and do 1/3 per year? As some of you are aware, other agencies also do traffic counts. And so trying to work with them to get something that's a little easier for them to deliver. And so this year we started that. And so this is our fall 2023 traffic counts, which I believe are probably getting close to wrapping up. I wasn't able to confirm that today. But we tried to put them in sections. And so here in 2023, you'll see we've got downtown and some of the counts down South End, Warner Parrott, and a little bit up Malala. And then next year we'll have a different section of town, and then that third year will be the third section of town. And so as part of that, our GIS group will be working on revising the apps that are available on our webpage with our traffic counts to kind of show that as well. So again, I believe the public can get to all of those traffic counts, which includes those speed, volume, and counts at each of those locations. So that's kind of the quick update on the speed count locations. Last week at the conference that John and I were attending, we were able to sit in on a presentation by ODOT about setting speed limits and the delegated authority process. So before I kind of talk through a little bit of that, I will share that we were able to corner in person, an ODOT employee, and get an update on our 2 traffic speed zone investigations that we're waiting on. We did on Friday get an update on the Glen Oak Road speed study, and they have issued that, and so I'll work with Vance and his crew to get the signs changed, but they did recommend a 30 miles per hour, which is what we had requested. They say they're close on the 213 one. They've had some back and forth between the investigator and the state traffic engineer that's delayed that one a little bit more. So I suspect in the next couple of weeks, we'll get speed limit signs on Glen Oak changed once I actually send the email to the streets crew. And so we'll do some social media outreach about that as well, letting folks know that the speed limit's being lowered. Excuse me. So kind of back to the delegated authority. What we did learn at the presentation is that ODOT has authorized one agency, Clackamas County, to issue their own speed limits. So they've kind of worked through the process, and they have one other agency, which I didn't catch the name of, that has shown interest in the program. So statewide, they've only got 2 agencies that are moving forward with the process. I was a little discouraged by that. I was kind of hoping that some of the bigger agencies would move forward with the program and kind of remove that workload from ODOT, allowing for the smaller cities to be able to get their speed studies done quickly or more quickly. That isn't the case, and they didn't really, I don't believe, John, unless you recall, they didn't seem to know why folks weren't moving forward with it. He did kind of reiterate the program does not let the cities and the counties establish their own guidelines. It is using, exactly the state's guidelines. So there should not be a difference in if the study is done by a local agency or the state. The outcome should not be different. And so I think that really what it comes down to is there's probably kind of 3 options as we move forward. We could stick with status quo, where we identify a roadway, kind of do a very high level review, feel like it should be a lower speed limit or a different speed limit, and then submit it through ODOT's process. That takes a small level of staff effort, and it costs us only staff time. If we pursue the delegated authority, we could kind of take it in 2 different routes. And I apologize, I should have made a slide for this, but time got away from me today. So with the delegated authority route, we could have a staff member trained to do traffic and speed investigations. We don't currently have anyone on staff that has that skill set or expertise, so we would be adding workload to an existing employee, training them in something new, and then we would need to go out and do traffic counts on that roadway, because it's highly unlikely that we would have current traffic speeds and volumes that were new enough to be able to set a speed limit from. So there would be a small cost for outsourcing those traffic counts, and then a high level of staff time to, 1, learn the process, go through ODOT's training, and complete those investigations. Another option, and I have started some conversations with Clackamas County about asking them to do our speed investigations. They have traffic engineers on their team that could, do that work, assuming they have staff capacity. And at that point, the city could pay them. That's less city staff time, but it's a higher cost for that work. Or we could also, it sounds like ODOT did say we could hire a third party, like a traffic engineering firm, to go out and do those speed investigations on our behalf, and use those in the process. That's ultimately going to be the highest cost. I haven't reached out to any consultants to kind of get a ballpark what they think that would cost per roadway. But it wouldn't be free like the current status quo process of letting ODOT do all the work. So I think there's kind of some options. Some are more expensive. We did not budget for outside expenses as part of setting our own speed limits. ODOT did share that we could just hire a consultant to do the study and then submit it, and then it would just be working. We wouldn't be in the queue waiting for the investigator to do their report. It would just be the state traffic engineer reviewing our third-party investigation. So that could speed things up as well, but again, at a cost.
Hey, Dina, I was at that presentation too. One thing I didn't understand is if the city goes their own route and you get staff trained and you do those investigations, ODOT reviews them, and then after a certain point, you get certified, and then for a number of years, you're basically doing it on your own. You're setting the speed limit. I don't know if that would be the case if you go with, let's say, a consultant or the county. I think they would be just doing the work, and it just helps you with the speed of, I mean, I guess you get the work done versus waiting for ODOT to do the work and then get it done.
Yeah, so I think there's some options. I know we did start some conversations with the county and ODOT and myself about, could the county be our investigator? Because when we apply for the delegated authority, we have to identify who our investigator is. And they have to be a separate person than our QA/QC reviewer. So it takes 2 internal staff. But yes, to get fully certified and that delegated authority, you have to complete 10 streets. I'm not sure we have 10 streets to do. And I'm not sure if we did come up with a list of 10 streets that we have that much free staff time of folks that would be trained to be able to take that task on.
That was my question, is if we did it in-house, what's like the return on our investment? So we know there's an upfront cost, but is the long-term cost outweigh the upfront cost? Because it sounds like other than ODOT, there's a cost involved if we go some sort of route. So that's what I was curious for. What it look like if we brought it in-house, that upfront cost? Maybe it's not budgeted this year, but maybe it's something to could look at budgeting down the road if there's a return on our investment. Because I think there is some benefits to that quicker turnaround, as we've seen with Highway 213. I think we're talking about 2 or 3 years now. We've been waiting for a response. And as we're seeing, the city is growing and moving and changing rapidly. And I don't know that we have 3, 4, 5 years to wait for it. So I think the more we can control our kind of determine our destination is going to be beneficial to us in the long run.
Yeah,
I think ODOT is hopeful that. Go ahead, John.
I think my walk away from that was that, one, especially staff turnover, going through all the effort to get trained up, and then, you know, that person leaves and goes to another organization, you lose all that, so then you're back to that. I mean, my walk away from it is we either work, you know, in the last few speed studies that we've done, we've put together a pretty detailed package to get to them, but it still probably hasn't been to the level that maybe it would be if we hired a Kittleson or a DKS or one of those, or, you know, the traffic consultants that we work with. And we also haven't gone to the effort of getting updated, you know, speed study data submitted with that package. But so my feeling is it's definitely going to be well, and the other thing is we don't have that many facilities, right? So even though we hear a lot about speeds and wanting speeds reduced, you know, there's some things that we can do there with some of the legislated speed zones for neighborhood residential, for instance. You know, this idea of going from 25 to 20, that can happen. We can do that without the speed study. But on those speeds, those typicals, right? 35, 30, 40, 45, those kind of speed limits, that's where we fall into this delegated authority piece. And my feeling is, you know, I know we didn't budget for it, but assuming they're not coming up more often than we kind of have had in the past, it would be to go ahead and work through, but if we need a budget amendment, or if we can work within our existing budget to kind of get that traffic study done using a consultant, that's probably going to be the best opportunity for us.
Well,
And-
concern or the county, like, I mean, if the county has a capacity, then it's gonna be more cost effective for
Right.
us.
That's
that
true.
route, yeah.
If the county's willing to do that, they even mentioned our county transportation engineer and indicated that, you know, he's one of the best. And so if he's willing to do that, but it's this resource thing for the county too. If they do it for us, they're gonna have to do it for all the other cities, jurisdictions in the county. So we haven't really got their buy-in from that just yet, but I
It
agree,
sounded- it
if they're
sounded like-
willing, if it's a business, I mean, the county does our signal maintenance, maybe that's a business model for them that they want to kind of build on. But then, I'm sure we're gonna pay for that too.
But so the county, like, if there's a road that's going into the city, or, you know, the area that's changing, the county then can do the work and set the speed limit within the county, but not within the city?
They can do the
They would
work,
have delegated authority for the county, but not within the city.
right? What I heard was we would have to, they could do the work, but they'd have to bifurcate at the city limits, and we'd
Yeah.
have to be the applicant.
Yeah.
John, are you guys having, can you get data access from like Google Maps and on traffic flows and that as part of some of your traffic counts? Because just for example, coming home or coming from work to here, I had to take the side route because the 205 was a mess. And it even showed up on my map that the bridge was piled up, the Oregon City Bridge. And it shows, like I'm looking here right now, it's showing over there by the car wash and one off
Jug
the
handle.
Prairie Schooner, that it's all red right there, but everything else is green, so you can see the backup flow. So there, I mean, there's a lot of data that they're getting from cars and cell phones and stuff that are driving around. Is government agency have any access to get counts and flows and times and peaks of?
I think there is a way. I know, for instance, Gilson and Associates has
We
done.
use that data.
They have used a lot of that data. We have access through some of our signal gathering data, but, you know, real-time data, like what you see in Google Maps or Waze and things like that. And if we may be able to get that access, but we don't readily have that
I'm
access.
just wondering if it's less expensive than going out and having all these bodies sitting out there, getting these big counts.
But you
when-
still have to do actual.
Yeah.
I know you have to do actual, but to expand that, maybe you could get more, you know, by splitting it up, meaning more of your data, your flows. So then you know when these guys are going out there do the counts, to find out what your peak times are, you know, for the.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't want to overstate the cost of traffic counting. It's just the effort of getting that done for that one little area, right? I mean, we've got really pretty good information based on the traffic counts that we're doing, but depending on the roadway, you may want to move that to a specific location, maybe pull it away from an intersection and do those kind of things. So, but, you know, we're still, you know, for traffic counts, we're probably talking less than on a speed study like this, we're probably talking less than a couple $1,000. So it's not
Excessive.
not excessive, it's just another thing. It's
Right.
another $2,000 that we didn't plan to spend, right?
Do you think by getting this data from this, like Google or XM or all that, people who are gathering it, is it cost effective? Or is
Well,
it
I think
premium?
the ORS is specific on how they want the traffic study done, and I don't believe that's a data source that they allow. So for these traffic studies.
Yeah.
We would have to follow the ORS and the administrative rules about how that would be done. And I don't believe they, I mean, the kind of data that you're talking about is truly tracking cell phones, kind of tracking data that way.
Well, I
And-
was thinking about this overflow, if this tolling thing goes through, we could see the peak periods of when traffic is moving, and then all of a sudden when start throwing coins at the machine, or they start charging your license plate, I should say, how that will start impacting the side roads through 99 and all the other places it's gonna go through. And that data could be used for fighting, how much the flow is at this peak times, how much the traffic is. I mean, it's just kind of weird, like I pull out of my driveway in my car and it will, before I turn and wait the garage door to go down, my car tells me how much my delay is to Tiger. Or there is no delay, like this morning it was 10 minutes. I looked at it, it was 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's pretty smart. I mean, and I'm not even asking it.
I don't think the city's gonna be able to beat that. That information is out there already.
Yeah.
Through subscriptions or through just, Google Maps. So I don't think we're gonna come up with, we're not pursuing anything that would improve upon that or make that our own. Is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
so I was just thinking, if we're still having this fighting for road money for people detouring, in case this thing continues to go through.
Diversion. You're talking tolling and diversion.
Right.
Diversion associated with
This
tolling.
data out there might be the thing to show the exposure. Because you see, like, okay, how many cars are going through this area? Now, if you throw up a toll booth right there, how many of these cars is gonna be diverting off and trying to find different ways around?
That's the modeling that's happening. The question is the accuracy of that modeling and how dynamic is that modeling? So we're not doing it, but Metro's doing it and the state's doing that. And we're hearing big numbers of diversion.
Oh, yeah.
The problem is like you have these traffic analysts and they're having to make assumptions, right? You have these models and you input all this current data and then you have to make assumptions like at certain cost, how many vehicles or how many drivers are willing to get off the highway and take another route. And so
Right.
it's a lot of kind of guessing.
A $2 toll may not mean much to you. You'd rather take it and get it done than
They're
somebody
talking
else.
$5 each way.
Whatever, whatever the number is.
You're looking
right?
at $10 round trip, that's, $240 a month.
Can we move on?
Yeah. So, anyway, the point I was bringing up is just when you're doing these traffic counts and stuff, is that data, would that be useful for the city when they're using it? Because I was really surprised that it showed the traffic on the bridge, the city bridge, and it was the red was right to where my car was. When I was in the traffic trying to get in there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the data is really accurate.
No, I think the real-time data is very accurate. How available that data is, I'm not sure.
Somebody's using it, other than Google.
No, you could purchase that data and we use it for certain modeling aspects.
I think we're gonna draw this to a close, okay?
Yeah.
Now, moving on, does anybody have anything they want to discuss at the next meeting?
Well,
or
we'll
later
bring
on
back that
agenda?
emergency
Now-
route.
In the interest of openness, I mentioned prior to this that I had concerns with Anchor and Division at that intersection. What with the inability to be able to see anything from Anchor or Division down toward the hospital on Division. And with the increase in use of the hospital over the years and the projection of more with additional residents projected probably to be coming up Anchor Way to get there, it strikes me that we would be ahead of the game if we started looking into that intersection as to how to get some site clearances to be able to make the turn from Anchor Way onto Division toward the hospital. Or maybe make a full stop at Division, even though it probably doesn't meet any warrants in the book. Or somehow look at that at a future time. So that's my take for the night.
We're happy to look into that, Henry.
In that case, if anybody has any objections, I'll call it. We stand adjourned.